Welcome to the Great Security Debate. This show has experts taking sides to help broaden understanding of a topic. Therefore, it's safe to say that the views expressed are not necessarily those of the people we work with or for. Heck, they may not even represent our own views as we take a position for the sake of the debate. Our website is greatsecuritydebate.net, and you can contact us via email at feedback@greatsecuritydebate.net or on Twitter @securitydebate. Now, let's join the debate already in progress.
Did either of you guys see or at least watch the trailer? I ended up watching the whole movie, but it took me 2 nights of Leave the World Behind.
No, I haven't. Is that the new one on Netflix?
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it yet.
Like people in the cyber world will chew this up.
Is it Swordfish all over again?
Oh, it is. It goes. I mean, the clip where it shows the boat landing on the beach, right, and crashing into the beach is like you're kind of like, ugh, right? But then you got to imagine planes falling from the sky, boats crashing into beaches. Everything is out. There is no TV. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess take the planes out of it and the boat out of it. If you took TV away from everybody, the ability to connect your phone to stuff, that part of it was very interesting because the families and the way they did everything, they're like, oh, I don't even know what to do. Like, I've always used my phone for this.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a great segue, right? Because that's what you were used to doing. So now you got to figure out a different way to do it. And like the one child having anxiety over not being able to see the end of her TV show, the final airing of her episode. And to her, that was a very, very, very big deal. But it was like in the realm of, in the larger picture, it was like, why is that such a big deal? But you could only imagine the amount of screen time that she had leading up to this chaotic event. And then you'll love when the Teslas, there's like a line of 200 plus of them that have all crashed into each other because they've been taken over and all clog the highway.
So it's not a fictitious story with the Teslas crash. Oh, sorry, Dan.
I'm more interested in this GM bullshit.
Let's
continue to dig ourselves deeper into a hole of our own making.
Yeah. Well, because iPhones every once in a while don't connect to the car, which leads to accidents.
It's picking up but we've not tested it, and but we're committed to this theory that we've never tested.
Yeah.
Like I watch friends of mine repost that because they're very close friends of Steve Kiefer, who left General Motors as the president of Europe, Asia Pacific, was the vice president of purchasing, but he's the one that's been leading the cause for hands-free because his son was the one that was killed in that accident. But I've watched people repost without reading any of the articles and like be like, hey, hats off to General Motors, and their drive to safety, right? And I was like,
no, drive to profit.
I'm like, I kind of want to private message you and tell you to take that down. And then I read all the messages that people put underneath it. I'm like, oh, he already got blasted. She already got blasted. I'm like, no point me even
This is a very
trying to explain it.
This is a very unpopular decision with the normal people too. Like, I love my CarPlay. I don't want it. I love it.
I mean, if you want to make it better, I think everybody should start going to the heads-up displays. Put it right in my line of sight. Like I have that on the BMW now. I love it.
Do you? I just can't.
Everything.
I don't want stuff impeding my vision or distracting or making it seem like there's something might be running or moving out in a periphery. I like my screens clear. It's just me. Like I
what's
would
in
never
the heads
turn
up?
it on.
So for the
heads-up display.
So by default, it's just the speed limit and my speed that I can see up there. But then if I want to change stations, I can hit a button. It'll bring up my presets. I can scroll through them, but I'm still looking down the road when I'm doing it.
Gotcha.
And if you bring up, and now because of the last iOS update, this only works with BMW's navigation, but it'll drop the navigation right in there as well. And honestly, BMW actually has done it better than any of the other apps anyways, that I can see that there's 4 lanes. You need to be in these 2 lanes rather than just turn here.
The one I like,
German.
Tesla have put it in the upper left corner. Like, there's the big screen, and it's in the upper left corner of the screen, so I can see it here. I don't actually look down. I just see it out of the corner of my eye, and that's fine because it's always here. It's never where a deer might be crossing the road and or something moves and spooks me. I get it. My father-in-law loves the heads up on his Corvette.
Well, it doesn't, for me at least. I don't feel like it blocks anything because you can see right through it. It's just
I think it's more about movements.
Yeah.
Especially, if you're driving at high speed, any movement is something you have to deal with or pay attention to.
Right.
So it's just some of that kind of stuff. But everybody likes it different.
Tell you what, man. I think Salesforce, have you guys seen their new commercial with Matthew McConaughey?
No.
Yeah,
I pay not to watch commercials on YouTube.
So this one, I watch Squawk Box every morning. And the new Salesforce one is Matthew McConaughey. So it's the Wild Wild West. He's walking out. You hear kind of the jingle from the boots. He goes, if AI is the Wild Wild West, is data the new gold? And it's like so true. We're in. And that's exactly what GM's doing. Why? Because we want to monetize the data that's off of it.
Yeah.
Privacy be damned.
Ain't that
the interesting part there is like it's Salesforce basically saying, we're not trying to take your goal, right? Like
that's exactly what it is. That's what they end with. Your data is your data.
Except we're the platform that's going to enable 900 other plugins to take your data.
Right.
Like Pardot and all of those other creepy ass things.
I have curiosity with the GM move. What do you think happens when they launch that in Europe? You think they're going to get backlash from the privacy and data ownership?
Hasn't GM basically abandoned most of Europe?
Yeah, it kind of has almost abandoned Europe, but it has not abandoned the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, the Middle East doesn't have the same rule though. They have different harsh rules. But I think you're going to get a different tact there, or you're going to get a clear opt-in question. Just like what was it? Oh, this Dropbox mess. This week Dropbox enabled their AI, which I'm still trying to figure out why I need AI on Dropbox when I just want it to be a damn syncing tool and do it really well. But they enabled it. They enabled it for everybody automatically, except in the UK and Europe. And there they had to opt into it. The rest of us had to figure out how to turn it off. Or that it had even turned on. And the other interesting part was that they also slipstreamed in a brand new terms and conditions along with it that allowed them to use data for training. Let me rephrase. I haven't read through the terms and conditions yet. They slipstreamed in a new terms and conditions, but didn't make it clear to people that there was a new terms and conditions. There are some conflicting things that I've been reading about what is like they say we don't use it for training, or we do use it for training. It goes to OpenAI too. It doesn't even stay with them. It's going back to OpenAI. It's kept for 30 days. It's deleted after 30 days. I have no idea. All I know is there's a big switch that says off, and that's where mine all are. Every customer, every client, every of my own Dropbox account off, and next to it a big screen looking at the pricing for Box.
What's it supposed to gain? As an end user, what's it supposed to gain you as a feature set?
I have no clue. I have no idea. I don't know.
It was like me trying to explain to Aishan like 6 years ago that we should find a way to negotiate and keep the data. And they're like, but what are we going to do with it? And I was like, well, I don't know yet.
Oh, you're the problem then.
We'll figure it out. Right. And like, Dan, as you were talking, I was like smiling to myself. I'm like, turn on the button today. We have no clue what we're going to do with it. Right. But we're going to gather all this stuff. And when we figure it out, we're just going to do it because data's the new gold. Matthew McConaughey said so. Did you see the commercial? And like,
well, if Matthew McConaughey said, then it must be true.
And I'm a huge Matthew McConaughey fan. Not going to lie. I tried to do like share screen, but it's disabled right now. I have 5 different videos of Matthew McConaughey playing of all the different ads.
Guys,
All right, all right, all right.
too funny.
Oh.
Well, I mean, like, this is becoming a theme because who else just did this? They just had a breach, and then they slipstreamed in new terms that prevented you from
Oh, you
suing
shared
them.
this.
Oh, you sent that to us where it had to go through
It was arbitration.
arbitration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was it just had a major breach this week? 23andMe. That's what it
23
Oh,
and me.
that's right.
Yep.
was. 23andMe. So it wasn't even a tax service. It was the company that holds your literally most personal thing you could ever have, your DNA. And then you've already sent it to them. They've lost millions of them to an attack. And then they say, oh yeah, by the way, psych, you can't sue us because as of today, you all automatically got into forced arbitration. That's a good way to operate. I mean, I was already very anti sending DNA to consumer health services, like non-medical, non-HIPAA based health services. This just solidified that.
In all honesty, I'm surprised it took this long for somebody to break in.
Oh, talk about a big blinking target.
Right.
Attack here, attack here.
So I was having a conversation last night with, of course, friends about security, and
Was
a
it
lady over
automotive
her,
or food? Thought
it
those
was it was mainly food and automotive, and somehow I finagled security into the conversation. But a lady overheard the conversation and just simply asked, she goes, "So do you recommend then that I have a different password for everything I log into?" And I was like, "Well, do you use a password manager?" And she was like, "Well, what's that?"
There's no
And I'm like,
thought to the question, Brian. The answer is yes.
yeah.
There's no
"Well,"
thinking. Don't pause. Go directly to go.
I was like, "Do you use a password manager?" Because I was like, in that case, all your passwords are should be already unique unless you set it somehow to have the same one for everything. And her next response was, to be honest, I just kind of assumed that like they already have my information ever. Anyways, I was like, "Who's that?" And she goes, "I mean, people that break into things." She's like, and I go, I had to smile and laugh. I'm like, I totally understand where you're coming from. You probably like, it's like you get smashed by the news, right? It's like, well, why does it even matter? They already have everything about me.
Defeatist mentality.
The feeling that
Yeah,
it's a losing proposition and nothing I can do can
Yeah.
help. I mean, it's not unrealistic that people think that way. But on the upside, you're always generating new data and new information that
Right.
has yet to be stolen, but still has time.
my friends took a deep look at me as I asked the person, I was like, "Do you have your cell phone on you?" And they pulled their cell phone out. And I was like, "Can you open up your screen?" And I went through and I was like, "So those are all the apps that you've downloaded on your phone, right?" I go, "How many of those have unique login?"
I
Like,
put an exclamation point at the end of the password when they make me change it, and then I make it 1, and then 2, and then 3. I
There's
mean,
gotta be
but this is this is not this is half of this is that people that grew up through this, and I'm guessing this is mostly happening with people who are our age or older, who didn't, when we started in this, it wasn't a concern. It wasn't something we had to deal with. So unlike the kids now who are growing up with this in their face all the time and have either decided to, I don't care, or they understand how to work with it. It's a big paradigm shift from I needed 8 lowercase characters as my password to get on the mainframe in 1990. It's a different world. And so, helping them change. I joke about it, but it really is a very real and understandable reality.
I actually
yeah,
think
I'll
some
be
of those password keepers need to change their model. Rather than storing all your passwords, go to a federated identity model. A lot like Apple, right? You think about that, going back to what you were saying, Brian, with all the different apps on the phone, I don't have to worry about the password. Why? Because Apple actually, in the context of mobile device makers out there, does a pretty good job around security, and I can authenticate using my Apple ID. Much prefer that. Then I don't have
a
to
lot
worry
easier.
about having it in all these other different places.
Yeah, I mean it's passkeys. It's passkeys and single entry just turned a little bit differently. But you got to remember that there's, 90% of systems don't support, they're still built on that old tech. And
Right.
so getting them to swap it out is going to be, is going to be
Well,
monumental.
but at
Although
least if you're doing it from your phone.
Once WordPress does it, that'll take care of what was it, 30 or some large percent of the internet runs on WordPress sites.
Yeah,
But
there's the platform to trust. Some of the most epic vulnerabilities ever.
at least if you're doing it from your phone, though, that ease ability, right? Like that removing of friction, right?
Right.
Makes it pretty simple. Like it's
But
amazing
there's
that just
I've seen some of the sites now, and I think this is coming up more in the banking industry. I could be on my computer, but I can use my phone as the authenticator. And I'm not talking about the rolling code or anything. It's putting a digital certificate on it that when I go to log in, it gives me a QR code that I can tag back to my phone. And then I have to authenticate to my phone and it releases that identity to prove I am who I am. I think that's great. And it's not much friction.
Right. And it's also leveraging, not just a certificate, but also signals based understanding of where that
Correct.
phone is, the Wi-Fi it's connected to, all sorts of really interesting stuff that helps to prove that you are near the other device that, that's logging in, or that you are in places they would expect you. I am excited about all this sort of come into reality. But of course, there's the, how will they use this information for bad, not good?
Sure.
Worry, because as soon as marketers get a hold of any of this stuff, they start to want to turn it into the creepy list of things that said you visited the page, you went to here, you were in this site, and then I sold you some things.
Yeah, it's ironically enough, you're talking about the marketing selling. Can't tell you how many emails I've received recently on, hey, you changed shops. Would you like to buy a list of customers that you can market to? Like, I think you might be talking to the wrong person here. Have you
Do
seen
you not
the
know what
role?
I do for a
Yeah,
living? And by the way, I don't sell.
yeah. Holy crap.
Yeah, that particular thing has gotten that particular, would you like a list of your competitors' customers, is an interesting one. And would you like a list of list of people that attended these conferences? I haven't yet gone and like pulled the trigger on any of them to see if they actually have valid information, because I've gotten some for conferences I've attended.
Yeah,
Um to see, like, actually compare, or if it's just a dollar scam.
yeah.
Eh,
I'll tell
soon
you.
it's gonna.
Go ahead,
I
Brian.
was gonna
Sorry.
say soon it's gonna be. I just saw that you moved recently. Would you like a list of all your neighbors, their phone
Right,
numbers,
right.
emails, and what they do for a living? For an extra $5, we can tell you what they W too.
I
we
might
we
like that. Actually,
we
I'd like that
noticed that you
before
leave
I
your
decide
lights
to
on
move.
at
I'd like
night.
to know who's in this sub.
We noticed that you leave your Philips Hue lights on at night. Do you suffer from insomnia? We'd like to sell you some
Nice.
Sominex.
Yeah, I mean, talking about what you mentioned about the conferences and shameless plug, this is one of the things that we took a hard stance at CSA that I really like. We don't turn over the names of who's at any of the
Good.
events. It's an opt-in model. If you want, make a human connection with somebody, and if they're willing to give your information to connect, that's what we wanted. That's what we want to incentivize.
And
We
just
did
out
the
of
same.
curiosity, how is that being received by the people who are sponsoring? Is that, are they still able to get the value they want out of the
My knowledge,
interaction?
we haven't received any pushback. I think some of it, because if you think about the customer willingness to pay and all of that, that because comparatively to other events, we tend to sit at the cheaper side of it.
Hmm.
So I think the value is there, knowing that, hey, I'm going to pay a cheaper rate, but now I have to be there in person and actually connect with people one on one. So with that in mind, that's why I think as you look at that context, that doesn't scale into the virtual realm. If we go back to where we were in COVID, that everything was over Zoom and some of those, then I think our model would break down. But at least as long as we're face to face, I think it works.
That's the same thing with Michigan Council Women in Tech is there's no list ever given. And it's always a conversation where, let's say there's a sales guy for a vendor that's like, oh, I am all in. That's a great, golf outing or great this. And then the marketing team gets on. They're like, so do we get a list of all, 450 people in attendance? It's like, great question. You do not. And here's why. Right. And they're like, so how do we get leads? I'm like, So this is where it comes down to hiring. So if you've hired the right person, they should be able to network, right? And I don't say it like that, but like in my head, I'm thinking to myself, like, what do you mean? How do you get leads? Like, I could give you 450 leads. You could follow up with all of them. But if the person you sent there didn't meet a single one of them, it's not a lead, right? Like,
It's very true. Networking is key. I feel like you've mentioned it over and over on this podcast.
You're going to make me go back for the show notes and find all the episodes in which we said it, aren't you? No, dear listener, dear listener, you're just going to have to go back and listen to the previous 53 episodes and find them yourself.
We're giving away an award to the first caller finds that episode.
Dan spends too much time with lawyers. We are not giving away anything. Please do not call.
So this week, the guys over at Antigen brought in a cyber insurance lawyer, somebody else, and they asked if I could join for a live podcast, and we got on. And they brought up 4 discussion points. One was the Citrix bleed. One was the MGM hack. One was trying to think back to all the different things that were discussed. There was a Citrix bleed. Oh, the Okta breach.
I bet you Move It came on up.
What's that?
Move It. That was
no. Move
really?
It didn't. And that's the one that to me is also very top of mind because from a vulnerability, Move It's been in the news for months now, and there's still companies that are popping up left and right that are getting hit with the Move It breach.
Well, the interesting part about Move It is it's usually buried so deep in a process and method, and so deep, it was built to be so deeply integrated that extracting it, extricating it, and putting something else new in is tantamount to rebuilding the entire interface. And that's not always easy to do. You know, it's great for us to say patch and patch and remove instantly, but it could be millions of dollars to make that one change.
Oh, it's the same thing with, what was the one going about a year back within the Java library that was doing logging?
Log4j.
Log4j.
Java for log4j.
And how many of us went through all of our systems like, how do we tell if it's there? Are we using that? And then you find out that it's embedded in all of these different pieces of software. Holy crap.
And hardware.
Yes.
It's like, did we use it? Wait, everybody used it.
Oh, and then, So, and then it became a dirty word. Oh, you get these questionnaires. Do you use log4j?
Oh my God.
Could you use log4? Well, everybody and their mother uses log. Even my mother. Hello, Mom. I know you're listening. Uses log4j. So anyhow, Brian. So go back to the podcast.
No, it was so I like that you brought up Move It because it kind of like followed like a little path down and ended up kind of circling around like one of 2 things. One was that vulnerability side and vulnerability management side. And then the other part was the human factor, right? And that you have this like I think it was a scattered spider is who they refer to on the MGM hack, who's is taking a very different approach of using the human element for social engineering, right?
Yep.
And really applying it. And that again goes back to some of when we talk about security awareness training, but at a different level because everybody can get security awareness training. You can make everybody aware, but there's different groups within the company that either hold the keys of the kingdom to finance, hold the keys of the kingdom to access for, somebody who's the actual admin, not breaking into the computer, but breaking into them, right? And like targeting individual people in social engineering them. And I'm like, this human aspect was a really interesting part of the conversation. I know we've talked about it before, but now you start to talk about AI and some of the things that could be done with it. And Erik, I know I messaged you about a gentleman that I talked with who I thought was, it was one of those moments where I sat back and was like, this guy is incredibly brilliant. And then everything he was telling me, I'm like, I'm incredibly scared, right? To the point where it's like 2 years from now, Brian, you could have, instead of a business development rep or a sales guy, you could have a bot or an engineered AI Brian doing a better job than you could ever do, right? I'm like, well, careful. It's hard to mix food, automotive, and security together. Like
Right. Right. There you go.
right? But he was going through it. I was like, could you imagine the social engineering tactics you could use then, right? Like it goes back to like Kevin Mitnick, like they when they talk about hacker, they're like, well, he wasn't doing this with code. He was socially engineering people. But now the ability to social engineer people to get access into things is really unique.
Right. Well, and then you add on to it. I guess it's technically still social engineering, but the ability to duplicate somebody in a digital personification. I was watching, I can't remember which news channel, and this was a couple weeks ago, and they were walking through that one of the biggest targets, and I think it's been this way for a while, is older individuals. And what they did is they actually created, using AI, mimic the voice of somebody's mother calling, saying, hey, I need money for this, something so-and-so is going on. And in the study, as they were listening to it, she's like, that sounds just like my mother. Like, how do you combat that?
Well, there's commercial, there's combat that, but there's also, I mean, the same tech is, again, back to the things that are used for good, used for evil. That same tech is being used by companies, and I'll put a link. I can't remember the name of the company, but there's a couple in the show notes in which they're able to recreate voices for people who have lost their larynx. You record it before you're going in for throat surgery, then you can use it. There was somebody who had, somebody in our industry, Rich, who just had who has had cancer in the mouth and has a new rebuilt tongue and is relearning how to speak, and in the meantime has captured, I think it's Elevate 11 might be the company, who has captured his voice so he can continue to communicate while he relearns how to talk with a new tongue. I mean, all of this is, again, this is some just amazing stuff that we're able to do with technology. But all of it needs to be balanced against the ways it can be used on the other side. But deep fakes are virtually undetectable now. Voices with inflection, and you can do it from very few words. So, people who are on podcasts have their voices out there all the time, can be recreated quite accurately.
Right.
See, and I love those stories. I think they're great. But then, like, this goes back to like the age of the internet when it first came out in like the early 1980s and the cuckoo's egg. It's like, what could be done though with the power of this thing called the internet, right? And like everybody can see. So I mean, I think that's an amazing story, amazing use case. How do you start talking guardrails? Like what guardrails do you put on it? Like Erik, you mentioned before in our own private circles, like the conversation of AI internally and okay, what are we doing around guardrails around using it? And Dan, I know you guys have messaged back and forth. It wasn't that I didn't give much thought to it. I was like, ooh, trying to justify like all the different business use cases that I couldn't think of at the time, right? Like trying to write notes, take a journal, like could this, like you walk around and just think, could this use it? Could I use AI to better this, or could I do a better job doing this, or could that use AI?
It's actually, it's interesting too. I mean, I feel like this is also, it's a big issue in academia right now, that you've almost got the AI witch hunt and trying to tell, as I turn in a paper, well, was it you that actually wrote that, or did you use ChatGPT? And so many times I've heard stories where somebody legitimately did write something, and no, I could tell you use ChatGPT. How can you tell?
There are detectors. So there's a couple of elements to this. There have long been plagiarism detectors. And the plagiarism detector, they're looking for cuts and reuse of certain things. And these are already, I'd call them only 50% accurate. A friend of my son's got caught by a plagiarism detector because she quoted Abraham Lincoln verbatim in quotation marks, but was marked as plagiarizing because, well, she didn't change the quote, which is usually a good thing to do with quotes, is keep them as they were, as they were originally said. So those are already marginal, but then evolving into into GPT checkers, and there are still, and this is going to reduce over time, so they're going to have to evolve, but there are definitely characteristic methods when you read a GPT output that you can tell that certain things were written by an engine. And now you're starting to be able to detect which engine is writing them based on style, based on technique. Even when you say write it in the style of Dan Ayala, and then it rambles for 93 paragraphs saying virtually nothing. But it still rambles for 93 paragraphs saying nothing in a way that still has some signatures that look like GPT-4 or
Sure.
Llama or something else that is, that is out there. And
But
so
this,
that's what's being used, but it's not perfect. And it also, then there's the question, and the academic publishers are starting to lay down rules, or have been laying down rules as to what can be used, how much of large language models can be used as part of a scientific project, how you call them out, the requirement to say this phrase was derived from a concept I got from a GPT. So there's, I think, the world of blinders from nothing, no GPT allowed in academia is starting to open up just a little bit, but mostly, as you would expect in academia, with attribution.
right. Well, that's the thing. And I come back to this all the time. It doesn't matter on the topic, that I feel like we make it very binary, right? That it is either right to use ChatGPT or it's wrong. Well, it depends, right? Now I owe Dan a royalty, right? Because if you think about it, if it's my original idea, I've put in the research, I've put this together, and then I use ChatGPT just to, hey, change the tone a little bit. Or can you clean up the message, make it a little bit more concise? I don't see an issue with that. We've been using Grammarly for the longest time to clean up some of that. I don't see it as being much different. The original thought came from me. And I feel like at some point you're going to start seeing this creep into business strategies and the way companies are putting things together.
Eventually? Oh, it's
Well,
already happening, Erik. I promise you. In fact, I've actually seen outputs of somebody saying, "I want a strategy related to this." People seem to love to use it to write job descriptions, but they're using it for, to start put together. These are the concepts we want to get to. Summarize them into five higher order items. There it is.
yeah,
But the thing you mentioned around around taking a concept and cleaning it up, there's an area of copyright still that is really undefined in this space. In the US, there is a court ruling that says that nothing automatically generated can be copyrighted. So then the question is, does this thing that come out, do you have the right to copyright, you as the author, to copyright output that came out of an engine like that,
sure.
even if it's a component of a larger work? Or, and then in other countries there isn't this definition yet. So then does the engine, the people who own and run the engine, own the copyright of the output that came out, or do you? There's all sorts of this stuff. And I mean, the same thing would apply with Grammarly if you really wanted to take it to it. If somebody wanted to put that case out there, which I suspect someday they will. But it's not as clear cut as it came from my brain and went out my fingers, either into pen or into keyboard, and therefore it is mine.
Right. Does that concern you as you think about how this plays out, right? You're seeing more security tools employ AI to start catching some of the buzzword, more sophisticated attacks that you get to a
It was
point.
an extremely sophisticated attack in which somebody didn't change their password from password 1 exclamation point.
Yeah.
Very
Everybody's breach
sophisticated.
notification to this date.
And
Does
they
that
care about
start
your
to become an
security.
issue that if I infuse an AI model into my tool, that we start catching a novel technique that then I say, well, catching that technique is actually, that's our intellectual property. I'm going to patent that. You can't copy that anymore. It becomes kind of a downhill effect, degrading kind of the efficacy of the industry.
Well, I think I hope to God we're at the end of software patents and process patents like that, because it's just been nothing but trouble. I mean, it's what a lot of our industries are built on, is that, but taking a method like that and copywriting it is, well, in that case it'd be how was it derived? Did it come out of a GPT that said, I see a trend? Now, can you copyright that? Can you actually copyright that? Or I guess in that case it'd be patenting it. But can you? I don't know.
It's going
Do
to
you
be
have to disclose
really
the origins? I don't know.
So let's look at this also from just strictly like a marketing role, right? The ability to take words, right? And you're looking at them and you're asking yourself, oh, I need to create a slide that embodies what I'm trying to say with an image. How do I do that? Right. And you could spend days, weeks. Hold on. I've spent days, weeks trying to figure out like what's the best way to make this look, right? So we did a game. I shouldn't even call it a game. We did an exercise and we were plugging in like here's the thought, put it in, here's the image that comes
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the gentlemen, John, who I talk with on a regular basis, some of the imaging that he's comes up with, and when I say he comes up with, when he plugs in like just a simple quote, ego will contain you. You are not your ego. You are a light. Let it shine. Say yes to life. And then plugs that in. And the image that comes back, I'm like, whoa. Right? Like now, and where I'm going with this is when you look at it from a marketing standpoint. So there's people that build business models on the ability to create imagery and presentations and that cause and effect. Like you put together the words, I put together the slides. And there's part of that now who owns that image,
Right.
Nobody owns
right?
that image.
But there are some I mean, using it from the marketing front and just going back to the academic sense, I think there are some useful models. So if you're not taking data, the output directly from an AI and plugging it back into a paper, a presentation, where I found it extremely helpful is exactly where what you said, Brian, that I can give it a concept. Hey, say this back to me in a different way. And it's more of idea generation just to get me to spark to go in a different direction. Or there's some that have come up now that are actually cool that you can give them your presentation, summarize this for me. And that allows you to check, am I conveying the point that I meant to convey? And if not, all right, yeah, I got to go back and tweak this because obviously it's not coming across the way I needed to.
Well, it's not coming across to that engine. So this is something I've struggled with now that, so Atlassian have put their AI into Confluence and you can summarize the page. And it's interesting because the summary is not necessarily written to a specific audience. Is it a technical audience? Is it a academic audience? Is it a general user audience? As people use things like Confluence for broad intranet sites, what used to be a very technical tool is now for for wider use. It's the targeting of some of that. That's something Grammarly does very well. You can punch in is it a general use? Is it a technical? Is it a persuasive? You can give some of those parameters, but all of these things are, it's still so early days. And then I take to the idea of, Cliff's Notes are cheating. Like the idea that, so Zoom also turned on recently without or with a change in their terms and a lot of kerfuffle, their AI service, which creates a summary of a meeting. And it comes back and it creates summary. And to my thinking, I have to be honest, isn't that cheating? Like again, this is Dan's spends too much time in academia. Go to the meeting and engage. Don't wait for the damn Cliff Notes. Because you being in the meeting changes the dynamic. It adds to it. The Cliff Notes are a cop-out. So are we enabling lazier workers to not be part of creation of the work that needs to be done?
Here comes the challenge.
I'm 5-10 minutes late to a meeting and I can go ahead and click on please summarize the last 5-10 minutes and it does so instantly. I walk in and I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, that's what I missed. Hey guys, just want to circle back real quick. When you guys first started the conversation, you mentioned this. I understand your position on it. Can you go back and touch on that? Literally, you show up 10-15 minutes late and just by clicking please summarize the first, what did I miss?
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful. And it's not that you were lazy, like you might have been grabbed by the board and asked for, hey, I need 15 minutes of your time, right? You're like, right? And then you walk into a meeting. You could never walk into a face-to-face meeting and say, hey guys, real quick, can everyone summarize the first 15 minutes real quick without me derailing the entire meeting?
Yeah, so I think this is another one of those, Dan Ayala, it depends, right? It depends on how you're actually using it. If you're using it because you're lazy and don't want to actually engage, okay, I agree with your argument. But on the flip side, I see a way that it could, like what Brian's talking about, it can make you more efficient. And I kind of liken this to the societal move now that everywhere we go when we're out and about, somebody has their camera out. I'm taking pictures, I'm taking a video. Why? Well, I want to capture the event or whatever's going on.
But
well,
they never go back and watch it.
Well, and the argument is you're not actually present, so you might capture the event, but you're not experiencing the event. Exactly. And that's where I think this comes in. By using the AI to summarize it, that allows me to free up. I don't have to handwrite notes. I'm engaged with you. Let's have a conversation. And it's like having the court recorder, right? That somebody is taking notes along the way on what was actually said. It allows that to happen while we have an authentic engagement.
But a court reporter doesn't synopsize and summarize. A court reporter records exactly what is written.
Sure.
And I think there's a difference. People should make their own interpretations over what's happening in a meeting, not take we're now well aware of biases, misinformation, and bad training that go into all these models. And I don't want that being part of the summarization of a discussion where I'm paying people. I am paid to be the expert in that meeting and make the translation between the words and actions into the words into actions or words into interpretation. If I wanted that, I'd just pay Zoom. I'd pay a staff of Zoom people to interpret shit for me.
Zoomies. Oh, wait, no, I think that's the thing.
So I think this is all, it all leads too far. Efficiency is fine, but I think I guess I see a path in which efficiency turns to laziness, efficiency turns to disengagement, and efficiency turns into misaligned understanding of what really went on in that, because the people present aren't making the interpretations.
I'm going to give you that one, because if you think about this from a psychology perspective, a number of studies have been done that if you look at the police talking with somebody trying to recollect what was going on, that we've shown humans are not very good at holding on to the exact story and what happened over time, right? That it's changed by our other experiences. And every time we recall that event, it changes just a little bit. So in that case, yes, it could actually change what happened in reality because it's the reality according to a bot.
Right. Which is why in Zoom's case, I am perfectly happy to leave the translation service on, or the closed captioning service. One, because it's an awesome accessibility tool. But two, because it captures exactly what was said. And someone can read down and read through it. And that is tantamount to attending the meeting, or being able to listen to the meeting in a different way and a faster way than listening to the recording, but without polluting their interpretation of what might have happened.
Right.
See, I'm going to go to manufacturing and
this shocks me.
Yeah, I did not see this coming.
Is it automotive manufacturing, Brian?
I can pin it in there. It's kind of hard for me to do. I've been too far removed to really be able to come back and kind of point to any one thing. But let's say you were taking like progressive dies or transfer dies, for instance, and I think they're used in automotive, right? If you look at the wear and tear of a die, and on average, they would say like, what is good die upkeep, right? Like once a week, every other week doing die maintenance. Why do you do the die maintenance? Well, we've seen over time, as different, tight tolerances on corners, et cetera, begin to deteriorate, that's where we begin to see a failure mode later down in the process. So you get this one piece flow, and all the way down here, when you're putting the part together, it's like, why are we getting this malfunction on this, this unique mechanical part? It's like, oh, well, this part is out of tolerance. Why? We didn't do any die maintenance, right? They use different steels, SPC 980, very high tensile, high strength, lightweight, used inside seating. I only know that because someone told me, maybe worked with it for 4.5, 5 years. What it does to a die,
ChatGPT, we got you.
Right. And put that into the modeling. So what ends up happening though is those dies have to be maintenance almost every other day. And when you hear the die open and close, it's like a boom, boom, boom. Like you walk through that stamping press and it's unbelievable, right? You're like, whoa, what's going on with that die? It's like, oh, that's stamping a high tensile, high strength, lightweight steel. Now, where am I going with this? All these AI models are built on data. So you got to pump a certain amount of data in, data collection, analyze all this data, right? And outcomes, here's first analytics on this, and this is what we built it to do, right? We're going to keep putting more data in, it's going to get better and better. If you have 30 years, 20 years of all this data, right, that you've kept on all your die maintenance and the records and the type of steel that went into it, the thickness and everything else, you have a great data model to build on the life. Like there's companies that have literally reached out to Michigan State University to say, hey, we are this large manufacturer of X. We'd like to understand the life cycle of a cow better.
Are they metal
like to
X's
build-
or wooden X's, or are they
the company X?
the company they manufacture X's? Is it they wooden? Do they metal? Is it they have carbon fiber model?
So in this case, they're a blend between carbon fiber and wood. Actually, Dan, I know. So company produces something, and they want to understand the life model of the cow, right? Who better to turn to than the Michigan State Moo University? It's like, hey guys, you know that cow that you had the little portal on the stomach and whatnot? We'd like to put together modeling on the life cycle cow to better understand how we could use that in all the farming that it is we're doing for this specific use case, right?
Right.
And it's like, oh, we never even thought of that. And we have all this data. Let's start to build this model, right? So this is where I go like, and I forget what conference it was. Everyone was talking generative AI, and I'm sitting on the stage, and I'm like,
It was every conference in the last 12 months, Brian.
Right? Yeah. But I'm like, I don't know that I have a lot to offer here. Like, I've never built a generative AI model, guys. I'm like, but I will say this: if you find a way for it to get someone to do some of my plumbing, I'm all in for it because I can't find someone to do that, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of a shameless plug, but like, guys, how does this better us, right? Like I see all the marketing. We just talked about images, right? We talked about how people can do this, right? Improve a paper, but how can we improve manufacturing? We have all this data that we gather. And if you're gathering the data, then put the data back into it and create some modeling that'll help you understand what dies are going to fail sooner rather than later.
It allows us to ask different and better questions now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And if we can get people to go into the trades, right? And AI can find a way to better train people to like, right? Or to understand why that's such a great field to go into, let's do it. And I could use a framer, a plumber, electric. So if you're out there, I am kind of throwing that out. Direct message me looking for a plumber.
Must be willing to travel to Michigan.
Right. Yeah, I'm interested on some of the changes that are to come, right? If you do this and if you look at this under the lens of bricolage, it says there's really nothing net new. It's just reorganizing things to create something that seems new, right?
Faster data analytics.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested. So if you go back to, because we talked about when the internet started and whatever, that SEO was the biggest thing for the longest time on websites, right? Search engine optimization. So what did marketers decide to do? Well, I recognize that I could trick the system by buzzword packing my website. The end user would never see it, but it's all behind the scenes. So when it gets crawled, it's all sitting there. How long is it going to take for some of these marketers to start realizing that, hey, well, here's how the data is aggregated for this AI engine. Now I can start packing it. So if somebody goes there and starts there to do a research on technology X, well, it's going to come up and say, well, this company, we're the best at doing this. And it becomes another false sense of reality.
Yeah, but I think, and Brian, all the examples you gave are all data driven. And there's a big difference between truly data driven and interpretive. And I think that analytics of data and failure rates and mean time between failure and when does the die, all of those things are empirical. It's scientific, it's evidence-based, it's just pure number data. That is open to way less bias and interpretation than human condition, discussions, interpretive. What did Dan mean when he said, I really don't believe in, I can't stand companies that try and assess my risk through assessing my websites that aren't actually mine. Things like that. Those are the kind of things that are harder and are more dangerous to use these things for. Or how do people, what's the sentiment of a population in this city? Or as we go into an election 11 months from now, what are the AI is going to say that the polls look like this, or this person's going to win. Those things have influence and impact because people will read those results and, can build on the bias. And those are the places where I get really worried about how these things are used for calculating, that over 30 years, this compound of steel fractures after an average of 11.2 million stamps. That is go do it and do it faster. It's the same kind of data analytics, just faster. But the rest of this, the interpretive part, the part that people really get, jazzed over GPT for, is that interpretive part. And this is nothing talking about how they were all trained on data they didn't actually have the right to use, or that people didn't know they were using. So that's another whole topic for
Are you saying
7
that
days.
we're coming to another data analytica all over again?
Oh
This
gosh.
goes back to when we first started having the discussion when was it Microsoft or Google, the sidewalk and
Amazon.
Amazon, right? Like all the things that were coming out, that we were having this discussion 3 years ago, and it was like, well, you know what they're doing, right? It's like if we could gather enough data on all the disparate data points of where you go and what you interact with, it makes our modeling that much stronger for what's going to come in the future, right? Like it's very, very interesting
The
to see that.
potential for mass manipulation.
So, Dan, going back to General Motors, right? And this is spinning to automotive, but not in a realm that I played in because it's happened in the last few years. So for those of you that know me, at one point I did work in automotive. But
What?
General Motors has ditched CarPlay and they've gone to something a little bit different. That's supposedly now the reason is around safety. But if you go back and look at it under
today, the excuse is safety.
Safety.
And when you peel that back, right, like it goes back to conversations I would love to say that I was having 5-6 years ago around how important all this data is going to be, and that you spend so much time in your vehicle going from point A to B to C to D, right? And all these different things you do. When you plug your phone in, most people have never read that little notation that says that all these messages and phone calls and everything it is that you do are the property of not you, who owns the vehicle, property of the vehicle manufacturer, even though you've bought and paid for the vehicle. Actually, that brings up a good point. If my vehicle is 100% paid off and I owe zero on it, it's my vehicle, right? But I'm paying, because I'm paying a subscription for this interface that I use that my phone is plugged into, and I gave up all my rights just so I could look at it to be able to turn on the air conditioning when it's 100 degrees out.
And that was confirmed just in the last couple of weeks. There was a lawsuit. I think it was Toyota and Honda and a few others. And the US judge confirmed that they can collect text message data from they had been. I put a link in the show notes. They had been because when you hook your phone into their proprietary system. And this is why the GM discussion today took a bit of this week took a bit of an interesting turn. And I put that link in the show notes as well. The idea was that automakers can collect and record your text messages according to a US federal judge, because you're plugged into their proprietary system. It's in the terms and conditions. You've agreed to it. You're getting them displayed. It's a convenience, and they get to see who you interact with and what's in the content of them. This is one of the reasons that CarPlay came into being. Apple, or at least what Apple said was, we're going to put a veneer over the front that obfuscates that. All that your car maker is going to see is the Apple CarPlay screen. The rest goes directly between you and your phone, which is the way I personally like it. I want less people in the middle of it.
Right.
And then this week that, well, a few months ago, like Brian said, when GM said they're getting out of the CarPlay business, interestingly, coincidentally, at this exact same time, they signed a massive deal with Google for Google Automotive, and also are removing, the third-party interfaces. But also they said that this was all about data collection. It was all about monetizing the data of the car in a way that Apple's veneer will not let them do. And then this week, the answer to that was no, it's safety. It's safety. That's why we're doing it. It's safety. To which 9 to 5 Max subject, GM's latest excuse for dropping CarPlay is its dumbest yet. That would indicate there were other implausible excuses that came before it. So it's an interesting saga and one I'm keeping track of.
And I just put that little note there. Dan, in all honesty, I think the reason they moved is because Google's not evil, right? That was Google's motto, don't be evil.
Well,
So it's like, what should we do?
Note the past tense in that.
Oh,
It was. It is no longer. And Google's an ad company.
And you guys have probably seen it. Like when you've been messaging me before, and now when I'm in the car because I reply back, I'm sorry, I have no opinion on this.
You never have no opinion.
Erik, thoughts? I see you sitting there ready to jump in.
Yeah, taking a line from one of our marketing professors. I'm not the customer, right? I think we do have a unique lens we look at this through. But if we were to just purely double click on the safety aspect of this, I hope that I'd love to see NHTSA and some of those start getting into some of the safety studies around some of these, because I actually see the propensity for this being less safe to be greater. Because now instead of me having my message where I can click on it and my car will read it back to me, well, now I'm going to go grab my phone. Oh, what are they saying? Oh shit, there's a car there.
Yeah.
So I think this is a bad move. I get why they're doing it. I get the data monetization, but I think it's a short-term move. The question will be, how pervasive is the thought pattern within consumers where interface and having my phone on there is going to be the driving factor that I choose a car?
Well, in 30
this goes
years,
back to awareness. Like the more you make people aware, it's like the conversation with the lady last night at dinner. Like, well, I just assume they already have all my stuff. If that's people's propensity to just be like, well, they already have all my stuff. General Motors, here you go. Here's to make this easy on myself. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my vehicle now has my entire database of all my contacts. I'm going to give it free access because this will make my life easier.
But using that analogy, I don't think people are really going to care and look at this from a privacy play. I think it's going to be a usability play. Do I want to learn yet another interface? I'm used to using my iPhone. I'm used to using my Android. And now I got to learn your system. And by the way, I can imagine that just like every new interface that's popped up, think about all of our different streaming services. I now have to figure out another way that, I got to connect each one of my apps into this. And by the way, next time I go to the app, it logged me out. Shoot. Now I got to log back in again. I think it's going to be an absolute mess.
And you can only do the ones that company has partnerships with.
Yes.
Oh, we got paid boatloads of money by Spotify, so we're only going to put Spotify in an attempt to encourage that. No. I use something else. Guess what? I'm just not going to plug it in, or I do what I do in my wife's Ford because it just just doesn't work. I take my phone, I play it through the speaker, I put it down in one of the cup holders, and it radiates sound up, and that's that's just how it works. Yeah. But history, the other problem is, your user experience, the user interface piece is really important, Erik. In 30 years of user interface design in cars, past performance is not an indicator of future is valid in stocks. I think it's a misnomer here, because apparently auto companies can't or won't hire user experience designers, or they just find ways to undo all the recommendations they make, because I've yet to see an in-car entertainment system that makes any sort of sense.
Right.
And so I have no hope that any of these are going to go. Apple seems to have made it. It's the same as what I'm used to and what I use my phone. The phone has become an extension of our brain, and you use it in the same way.
Well, and it's because I think it's two different experience journeys, right? If we think about there's the car journey that is, I can control the settings of my car, the heat, I can see telemetry off of my car. And then there's the usability journey that now I want to plug in my apps, text messages, music, and all of that. Those are two different paths. Because I would make the argument, owning a BMW, I think as you think about it in the context of the usability and me getting information off my car when I need it, super simple to use. It's intuitive on where everything's at. And then they go, well, you don't need the other journey. Why? Because Apple or Android already takes care of it for you. Just connect your phone and it works.
Yeah.
Do you pay for the heated seats in the winter with a monthly subscription with BMW?
Not actually a thing on my car. So that's the beauty of buying a used one. Heated seats are mine in perpetuity.
Or until they decide otherwise and decide to change the terms and conditions. I'll leave this topic with one. We're unfortunately close to the
I think
end.
they backed off that
time.
position, by the way. I think
they
BMW
did revoke that. Yeah. Just on this topic, back to the safety aspect of it, a report came out last week, I think it was, on the evolution of safety in the car. And the cars have become much more safe. And around the world, automotive deaths have shrunk, except in the US. And what's one of there's a few reasons. One, US people are buying bigger cars, harder trajectories to stop. The one I found most interesting was that in the US, unlike most other countries, we're forced to buy automatic cars, which means we do not have to focus on shifting or other transmission related activities, which means we have time to be doing other things, like specifically using mobile phones. And all of this is, where innovation has led to other safety issues. Give me back. So this is my plea. Give me back a manual transmission car, and I will gladly put my phone back in my bag and not use any of your interfaces, be it CarPlay or the other. And I'll just listen to over-the-air radio.
That is very interesting. I would have never thought about that. Quick question. I know we're close to the end. What's more expensive to produce, a manual transmission or an automatic transmission?
These days, I'm going to guess it's a manual is more expensive.
So it's interesting. If the volumes were exactly the same, the manual transmission is cheaper to produce than an automatic, but they push the automatic to be at a lower price point and raise the price of a manual transmission to push people to the automatic transmission.
Yeah. Well, you used to have to pay more. I used to have to pay an upcharge for automatic transmission on cars in the 80s.
Yeah, that model went completely away at the end of the 90s, early 2000.
Yeah.
And that's for an entirely different show. And if you're curious, feel free to direct message us or hit us up on LinkedIn to ask, why would one say that a manual transmission costs more than an automatic transmission? What marketing need could there be? Plug that into your local chat GPT and see what it has to say about the manual transmission. A lot of data points out there.
I'm guessing it has something to do with disincentive to buy. Well, if you got this far in the episode, come to the LinkedIn post that'll inevitably come out along with the publishing of this episode. Put the word automatic transmission or manual transmission in the comment and let us know, A, that you got to the end of the episode, B, that you subscribed in your favorite podcast app or in YouTube, and C, what you thought of the episode. And you can find us in a whole bevy of places. But first, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And thanks to you, Erik and Brian, for yet another great security debate. You can find us on our website, www.greatsecurity.debate.net. You can find us on Twitter @SecurityDebate. And I'm just not calling it X. I'm just not going to do it. This is the one case where I'm a proponent of dead naming. You can email us feedback@greatsecurity.debate.net, and you can find us in every single one of your favorite podcast applications. Although, as I understand it, the number of podcast applications continues to dwindle as the dominance of Apple and YouTube and Spotify continue to grow in that space. But that's okay because I get good metrics from them. So go ahead, find us in your favorite podcast application, and please subscribe. Let us know if you have any thoughts for future show ideas, or if you were wondering if Brian might actually have worked in the automotive industry. We're still wondering ourselves. Thanks so much. We look forward to seeing you again on the next Great Security Debate.